Let's talk about dinosaurs and why they disappeared while small birds were able to survive. Hi, my name is Kabbalah, and please share it as well to support us. Now, we know that in the history that dinosaurs were big and huge species that could not stand a catastrophe. They were almost immediately wiped out of life as a result of the catastrophe that we know that happened some millions of years ago. While some small animals, some birds and some ants and stuff like that were able to survive that so-called catastrophe. And the answer is simply because the dinosaurs were not able to adapt themselves to the change of the reality, the change of the conditions. But these small animals, these small birds were able to adapt themselves to the change. So actually the answer lies in the capacity of adaptation. You see, the reason why I'm talking about this is because today in Africa, we all want to be big when it comes to entrepreneurship. You see, you start the business today and tomorrow you want to become huge. You want to really emerge and grow as a multinational, employ many people and stuff like that. Good dreams. And because we want to do all these things ourselves, and in the present time, it disturbs us when we think that the future generation, or there are certain things that must be accomplished by the future generations, by our kids, by our grandkids who will take over on what we have been building. So that idea really disturbs some Africans, because what we want is to see with our own eyes, is to be there, to experience our achievements that we have been working for. So that alone, that mindset prevents us from being able to anticipate some changes that are taking place in the world and adapt so that we can make sure that our project has some kind of continuation. Maybe that continuation can happen through other people, through our children or through the children of our children and so on. We don't have that in mind. So it is important now for African entrepreneurs to understand the capacity of adaptation which helped the small animals in the past to survive, and which, because it was lacking from the dinosaurs, then they couldn't survive the catastrophe. It doesn't really matter how big you are. What is important is, are you able to adapt to the change that takes place in the world today? You see, many people, as I said, we want to be big, we want to be huge. But the point is not always to be huge, to be big. I think the point is more on how are you able to adapt to the change that takes place in the world. And when we look at the world today, there are some huge changes that are taking place, but we don't just notice. You see, I went through some African entrepreneurs with this question to find out how we process information. I was asking, what would you do tomorrow morning, for example, if you wake up and they tell you that your liberty has been limited? Now we are going back to the slavery, and you don't know, you are no longer owner of whatever that you have at the moment. So it's actually slavery reinstituted. What would you do? What will be your reaction? And many people will be like, well, I will fight back, I will resist, I will protest, I will do this and that, I will buy guns and all these good things that we want to do when things like that happen. But this is simply because we base our action on a sudden change. You see, in most cases, African, we always act when we have our backs against the wall, when we don't have options. That is when we instinctively now begin to react, right? Even though sometimes the change that we're reacting against has been implemented slowly and smoothly in our eyes, but we were unable to realize and to take action against it. You see, so we went for a big bang to happen so that we can now begin protesting and begin reacting. And mostly when we react, we hand over the control of our lives to other people, those who act, and then we now have to react. But when you look in the society today, there are certain important changes that that are taking place in Africa that we don't notice in order to begin now anticipating their bad effects of our lives. For example, some years ago, when you go through any African community, you will see that African people were controlling their markets. It means they were buying, they were selling breads, they were selling sugar, they were selling meals, all these things of the basic necessity that we need every day. We were the ones who were selling these things. But today, when you go through any African community, whether you are in the Congo, in Zambia, in South Africa, look in a community, who controls the markets? Who controls the market? To whom do we go to buy our daily bread every day? To whom do we go to buy, airtime? To whom do we go to buy sugar? To whom do we go to buy the games that our children play? This is important. Now, situation's totally different. It's Chinese now who controls the local markets. It's the Indians, it's the Arabs. These are the people now to whom we are running to in order to get the bread, in order to get sugar, in order sometimes even to get employment. So at the same time, we want to be bigger. We want to be huge. We want to become, multinational corporations, stuff like that. But we don't see the change that is taking place right in our communities, right in our villages. These people are everywhere. Even in our villages, you find Chinese there, you find Arabs there, you find Pakistanis. What do we do? Because these are the things that we can never hand over to other people's control or responsibility, because this is how, or these are the actions actually that precede the enslavement of a whole community. When we are happy and comfortable to hand over the control of our markets to other people. You see, there are basically 5 things that we cannot allow other people to control them in our communities. The first thing is agriculture, because that's where we produce the food that we eat. So now the question is now, who controls the food production in Africa today? The second thing that we cannot leave in the hands of other people is the market, the supermarkets. Who controls the supermarket? Because it's through the supermarkets that we are able now to distribute whatever that we produce. Production is one thing, but distribution is another thing. How do we distribute our food? How do we buy? How do we sell our food? It's through the supermarkets. Who controls those supermarkets in Africa? As I said, Chinese now have invaded Africa in terms of controlling our supermarkets. Arabs, Indians, Pakistanis, all these people. We don't have control of the supermarkets now, the same way that we mostly don't control the agricultural industry in Africa or sector in Africa. And then number 3, something that we cannot leave in the hands of other people is the bank. The bank, which has the responsibility to invest in the people in order to create economy and create employment and all these things that we need. Who controls the money, right, in our community? The banks mostly are owned by other people than ourselves. Therefore, there's not much investment in African initiatives. All these young people that we see in Africa with brilliant ideas, they get stuck because there's no means of investment in them, because all the banks are owned by other people. And number 4 is the education. You see, because it's through education that we are able to teach the next generation, because education itself is the preparation of the future generation. So who controls the education in Africa, in our community? You answer to that question. And number 5 is actually the hospitals through which we are able to heal or to cure ourselves with different diseases. And if we leave these 5 areas in the control of other people, we are then making ourselves comfortable for the next phase of enslavement that our children may not be able to escape. So it is right at this moment that the African entrepreneurs need to understand the power of adaptation, Things are changing. How do we adapt ourselves? What kind of mechanism do we put in place in order to adapt ourselves to the change that takes place in the world and anticipate the bad effects of this change? You see, I'll give you an example of Chinese just to make you aware of the change that are taking place. But I'm not saying that we need to adapt to the current status quo whereby our market is under the control of other people. No, but I'm talking generally that there are changes that are taking place and we need to be able to anticipate as African entrepreneurs, because we are seeking much the greatness. We are seeking too much, the greatness, the achievement. We want to be big, but we don't see that the society in which we live is changing and our survival is most important than our greatness. Must keep that in mind. Your survival, your continuation is more important than your greatness. It doesn't help us to build an enterprise that grows so big today, and in 5 years' time, it dies, it collapses because a catastrophe happens. Because catastrophes will always happen. The same way it happened and ended the existence of dinosaurs. It can happen again. It's always happening. We remember what happened in 2008, the financial crisis. So are we able to adapt and to continue surviving, continue existing ourselves? Exist as a business, as a corporate, as an organization, as entity, as whatever we are trying to build in terms of our projects. Are we able to maintain that for the future generation? Is it because that is what is important, is to live longer than to be so big for 1 year and the next year you are down and you cannot survive. So this is what African entrepreneurs need to understand now. This is what African entrepreneurs we need to understand now. The power of adaptation to all these changes that are taking place now. And even if you are an aspirant entrepreneur, this is what you need to keep in mind. And everyone needs to understand it, because these changes affect us generally as African people. You see, before it was said that you need to go to school, get a degree, get a good job in order to live a good life. But today that advice is no longer applicable, because most of jobs that we have been running for are now being done by robots and artificial intelligence. So you can already anticipate what will happen in the future if we don't also put in place some mechanisms to make sure that Africa has a future and a better future out of the 21st century. So this is what the African entrepreneurs need to understand now in order to put in place certain mechanisms of survival. It doesn't matter for you alone to be bigger while you need to collapse, you have to collapse the next morning. But we have to make sure that we have in place some mechanisms that will allow us to continue. And one of the ways we can do it is to build community entrepreneurships, so to say, is to come together as African entrepreneurs and build collective corporations or collective institutions that can survive, out of 21st century, that can, outnumber or outlive people who have built them. That is the secret of success, mostly of the biggest organizations that we have come to know today in the world. Thank you very much. I hope this has been useful to you. And if it is, please subscribe, like, and share the video so that other people can be in touch of our inspirational and revealing contents. Thank you very much. We'll see you again.